I wasn't supposed to be home for another 2 days. The early morning flight from Chicago back to Portland had been a last-minute decision, a gut feeling I couldn't shake. My phone, still buzzing with unread emails, felt like a stone in my tote as I slipped my key into the lock of my childhood home. The door creaked open, and the familiar scent of lemon polish and Mom's lavender detergent wrapped around me. For a heartbeat, I almost smiled, until I heard the scrape of cardboard against hardwood. I stepped into the hallway. Boxes, my boxes, lined the wall like silent soldiers. My old varsity jacket peeked out from one, the sleeve dangling like an accusation. In the living room, Mom knelt beside a half-packed box of books, her face flushed with effort. Dad hovered nearby, taping another carton shut. Neither of them noticed me. "Just trying to help her get settled before she arrives," Mom whispered, her voice soft but brisk. "Tiny studios, barely the size of her old bedroom," Dad replied, pressing the tape down with a final, decisive swipe. For a moment, the air seemed to thin around me. My fingers tightened on the strap of my bag. Tiny studio? Settled? I hadn't told them I was moving anywhere. The silk of my blouse clung to my skin, damp from the lingering drizzle outside, as I stepped fully into the room. "Want to tell me?" I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "Why you're packing up my life?" Mom froze. The roll of packing tape slid from Dad's hand and thudded against the floor. I can still remember the day everything snapped. It was late spring in my hometown of Charleston, the kind of day when magnolia blossoms release their heavy, sweet perfume and the air clings to your skin. I was 21, fresh out of college, and brimming with plans I thought my parents would be proud of. Instead, I found myself standing in our family's sun-washed kitchen, facing my mother's careful frown and my father's crossed arms. "Brooklyn," my dad said, my full name, not the casual Brooke he used when he wasn't angry. "You can't build a life on this. Freelance photography is a hobby, not a career. We've already found a studio apartment near the bank. It'll keep you close, safe. You can start applying for teller positions." The clatter of the ceiling fan filled the silence that followed. My chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. "Dad," I said, my voice thin, "this is my career. I've booked 2 weddings this summer. People like my work." Mom's eyes softened for half a heartbeat, then hardened. "Sweetheart, we just want what's best for you. A stable job. Benefits. You can take pictures on the weekends." The words stung more than I expected. Like my dreams were a hobby I'd eventually grow out of, like finger painting or braiding doll hair. I gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white. "Photography isn't a weekend thing for me," I whispered. Dad's sigh was long, weary, like he'd already given up. "You're young. You'll understand someday." I felt the hot swell of tears, but blinked them back. That was the moment I realized if I stayed, they'd keep deciding what I should be. Grandma Lila was the only person who'd ever looked at my camera and called it a gift. When she passed the previous winter, she'd left me her old leather satchel, the one she'd carried when she traveled cross-country as a young journalist. That satchel sat on the chair by the door now, worn and waiting. I grabbed it, the scent of aged leather steadying my breath. "I'm not moving into your studio," I said. My voice trembled, but didn't break. Before they could respond, I slung the strap over my shoulder and stepped outside. The heavy air met me like a challenge. For the first time in my life, the road ahead, uncertain, unpaved, felt like mine. When I first stepped off that Greyhound bus in Boston, the cold spring air bit at my cheeks like a challenge. My one battered suitcase rattled behind me, its tiny wheels catching on every crack in the sidewalk. I tightened the scarf around my neck and whispered to myself, "This is the start, Ava. No turning back." I rented a room barely bigger than the mattress it held. The wallpaper peeled like old bark and the radiator coughed more than it heated, but it was mine. Every evening after my shift at the bookstore, I would sit cross-legged on that squeaky bed and scroll through job postings, chasing opportunities with the quiet fury of someone who had been underestimated one time too many. The advice my grandmother once gave me, "Grow where they say you can't," kept looping in my mind. I'd scribbled her words onto a yellow sticky note and stuck it above my mirror. Some nights it felt like the only thing holding me upright. A week after arriving, I stumbled into a networking event at a co-working space downtown. I almost turned back when I saw the sleek blazers and perfect blowouts. But then a woman about my mother's age caught my eye. Her silver-streaked hair framed a smile both kind and sharp. "First time?" she asked, her voice like warm tea. "Is it that obvious?" I said, clutching my thrifted tote. She laughed. "Not at all. I'm Rachel Morgan. Come on, I'll introduce you around." Rachel turned out to be the quiet force behind a thriving boutique marketing agency. She didn't care that my resume looked like a patchwork quilt of odd jobs. "You've got a storyteller's mind," she said after reading the blog I'd been writing in secret. "I can teach you the rest." Her belief lit something in me I didn't know I'd been starving for. I started as an unpaid intern, catching the 6 a.m. bus to the office and staying past midnight more often than not. There were nights when my eyelids burned and my fingers cramped from drafting proposals. More than once I cried quietly in the bathroom, afraid that the old voices, "You're not enough. You'll come running home to," were right. But small wins stacked up like bricks. My first client presentation earned a quiet nod from Rachel and, later, a whispered "well done." A month later, I closed my first solo account, a local eco-friendly cafe that credited my campaign with doubling their weekend traffic. By the end of that year, Rachel offered me a junior partner position. I wore the same pair of black pumps every day, scuffed at the toes, but to me they gleamed like trophies. Through it all, I kept my success tucked away like a precious secret. Calls from my parents went mostly unanswered. On social media, I posted only neutral snapshots, coffee cups, city skylines, never my office or the team that now looked to me for direction. Let them think I was scraping by in some drafty attic apartment, I thought. One day, when the time was right, the truth would speak louder than anything I could say. The sound of the elevator doors sliding open was like the soft intake of a held breath. I glanced toward the entrance of my loft, the late afternoon sun stretching long copper stripes across the white oak floor. My heart gave a single, hard thump, half anticipation, half the echo of old hurt. They stepped inside hesitantly, Mom clutching her purse strapped like a lifeline, Dad scanning the room as if he'd stumbled into the wrong address. My brother, Ryan, hovered behind them, his baseball cap pulled low. They looked small against the backdrop of my open-plan space, 12-foot ceilings, exposed brick walls, and an entire wall of glass overlooking the Hudson. Mom's eyes darted from the framed photographs of my travels, Marrakesh, Kyoto, Santorini, to the custom walnut shelves lined with design awards and first edition books. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Dad adjusted his cuff, the same old nervous tick, and for a fleeting second I saw the man who once told me my ambitions were too big for someone like you. I kept my voice light. "Welcome. I'm glad you came." Ryan whistled under his breath, low and unguarded. "This is wow. This place is insane." I walked toward the long marble island where I'd set out coffee and a plate of lemon bars, the scent of citrus bright in the air. My heels clicked against the polished concrete, each step a quiet declaration of everything I'd built. Mom finally found her voice. We didn't realize you were living like this." Her words trailed off, like she was afraid to disturb something sacred. "That's because I never told you," I said gently, resting a hand on the cool countertop. "I needed to know I could do it on my own first." Dad cleared his throat, the sound rough, unpracticed. "When we packed your things that day, we thought we were helping. You were so young, and that tiny studio—" He stopped, the memory catching him mid-sentence. "That studio," I interrupted softly, "was the first space that was truly mine. And from there, I built this." I motioned toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread like a jeweled map beneath the fading sky. Mom stepped closer, fingertips grazing the edge of a framed architectural sketch. "You designed these buildings?" Her voice carried a mix of disbelief and awe. I nodded. "And a few more you might have read about in the Times." Carter and Hale Architects, my firm, was behind the new Riverside Pavilion and the Midtown Green Tower. Ryan's head snapped up.
Wait.
You own Carter and Hale? That firm everyone's talking about. A slow, wry smile curved my lips.
Yes.
I'm the Carter. The room fell into a charged silence. Dad's gaze swept the high-beam ceiling, the sculptural pendant lights, the carefully curated art, each piece a story of late nights, failed drafts, quiet triumphs. His shoulders slumped, pride and regret fighting for space on his face. We thought you'd need us, Mom whispered, her eyes glistening. I did need you, I said, letting the words settle like warm rain. But not in the way you believed. I needed to prove, to myself most of all, that I could stand on my own. Ryan exhaled, a long, low breath. Guess you showed us. I crossed the room and gently took Mom's trembling hand. I'm not here to shame you. I just wanted you to see the life I built, the one you never imagined for me. I wanted you to know I'm not the girl you tried to move into a box that day. I'm more, and I'm still your daughter. Dad finally met my gaze, his voice rough but steady. Emily, we were wrong. I squeezed Mom's hand, feeling the years of distance narrow to a heartbeat. For the first time in a long while, the silence between us felt less like a wall and more like an open door. I leaned back against the marble edge of my kitchen island, the steam from the untouched coffee curling like a silent warning. The late afternoon sun spilled through the wide windows, catching the brass edges of the framed photographs on the wall. Photos of places I had traveled alone, projects I had built from nothing. My parents stood across from me, their faces stiff, a strange cocktail of pride and guilt flickering behind their eyes. For years I had dreamed of this moment, though not with the bitterness I once carried. No, this was different. My success wasn't a weapon. It was proof that I had become the woman I needed to be, with or without their belief. I'm not here to hurt you, I began, letting my voice stay low but firm. But I can't pretend nothing happened when I came home that night and found you boxing up my life like it belonged somewhere smaller. You didn't ask if I was ready. You decided for me. Mom flinched as if I'd reached across the island and touched an old wound. Dad's gaze slipped to the polished floor. I know you thought you were helping, I continued. But you need to understand what that kind of help costs. It told me you didn't believe I could stand on my own, that you didn't trust me to choose my own path. Silence stretched, heavy and brittle. I let it breathe. So here's where we stand, I said finally. I'm willing to help you both in ways that matter, but only if we start over. On my terms. Dad's brow furrowed. Your terms? Yes, I said simply. First, no more deciding my future when I'm not in the room. You need to trust me to make choices. If you have concerns, you come to me. We talk. Like adults. Mom swallowed hard, her hands gripping each other. We can do that, she whispered. Second, I said, I'll help you renovate the old house, make it safer, more comfortable. But you'll need to let go of that constant fear that I'll fail. I need you to believe in me, not hover like a net waiting for me to fall. Their eyes softened, just slightly. And last, I said, my voice gentler now, you have to find something for yourselves. A passion. A dream you gave up for the sake of control. Whether it's volunteering, painting, taking a trip you've always put off, something that's yours. Because the more you hold on to my life, the less you live your own. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The golden light deepened on the kitchen tiles, and outside, a breeze rustled through the oaks like a quiet applause. Mom's eyes shimmered. I used to paint, she said softly. Dad gave a small, slow nod. And I've always wanted to fix up that old sailboat. A smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. Then start there. The air shifted, lighter now, though still fragile. For the first time, the power between us wasn't a tug-of-war. It was balanced. The September sun draped the porch in a buttery glow as I leaned against the railing. The grain of the old wood warm beneath my palms. The air smelled faintly of cut grass and the cinnamon candle my mom had lit in the kitchen. For the first time in years, the house no longer felt like a battleground. Inside, I could hear the soft murmur of my parents' voices, no sharp edges, just the gentle rise and fall of people learning how to speak to each other again. Earlier this morning, Dad had quietly asked if I wanted to join him for a walk tomorrow. He hadn't asked me for a walk since I was 15. Mom had already started cleaning out the attic, muttering something about making space for new stories. It wasn't perfection, it wasn't supposed to be, but it was movement, and that mattered more than any apology. I turned the cool silver locket over in my hand, the one Aunt Margaret had pressed into my palm the night I left. "Carry your own key," she'd whispered back then, her eyes bright with a courage I was only beginning to understand. For years, that locket had been both armor and compass. Tonight it felt like a quiet, steady heartbeat of its own. My life no longer hinged on their approval, or on proving them wrong. The woman I had become, company founder, self-made, unafraid, was built from my own choices. Their acceptance, finally offered without strings, was a gift, not a necessity. Through the open window, the scent of Mom's apple pie drifted out, blending with the cooling evening air. My chest tightened, not with anger or grief, but with a bittersweet kind of hope. I traced the locket's edge one last time and smiled. "Thank you," I whispered, not just to Aunt Margaret, not just to my parents, but to the younger version of myself who had once stood shaking in the dark, believing she could build something better. The wind caught my hair and carried the words across the yard like a promise. I straightened, shoulders square, and stepped back inside. Some homes you return to because you're ready, not because you have to.